With us now at the 5th year of Donkey Kong Month, we've reached what feels like an entirely new era for the simian hero of video games. As many have said already, the 90s were DK's kingdom. He rose to newfound stardom with bold, unflinching confidence, pushed to greatness by one of the most talented development studios of that time. Through a trifecta of well-received 16-bit platformers and the complicated specimen of Donkey Kong 64, Rare had become inseparable from the Donkey Kong franchise. They were just as connected to the series as Nintendo themselves were. But business is business, and as we all know, that seemingly unbreakable bond was eventually severed. Microsoft's purchase of Rare left a lot of uncertainty in many projects, some of which would eventually make their way to one of Microsoft's own consoles. But Donkey Kong was the one franchise Rare had commanded that left the biggest vacancy behind. In a post-Donkey Kong 64 world, what would Donkey Kong look like without the acclaimed Rare studio powering his series? Well, Donkey Kong Country Returns was released more than a decade after Donkey Kong 64, kickstarting the series once again to critical and fan acclaim. But before we take a look at Retro Studios' foray into the franchise, I believe that we're forgetting something. There was another original platformer featuring the heroic ape that often gets overlooked when examining the character's history, and I don't think it deserves to be. So with us at 5 years of DK celebration, let's give this strange little platformer some attention, because Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, like the bellowing yell from its main character, announces its radical differences and ambitious design philosophies loudly and proudly. It's a wild, crazy, in-your-face success of a game that I can't help but recommend. So before we dive in further, let's address the elephant in the room. This. Yes, the bongo controller is easily the most noticeable part of Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. While the Donkey Konga series took the cartoonishly constructed input device into overt rhythm game direction, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat is much more ambitious a project, one that also jump-started one of Nintendo's strongest limbs of development. It began when Yoshiaki Koizumi, one of the directors of Super Mario Sunshine, received a suggestion from Shigeru Miyamoto himself to direct a new game featuring Donkey Kong. This title would become the first game from Nintendo's brand new Tokyo-based Entertainment Analysis and Development Division, EAD, and with Rare no longer involved with the series, the new project Donkey Kong Jungle Beat became a critical proving ground. Nintendo had to show that losing Rare was not going to be a setback and that they could continue the Donkey Kong franchise without them. But Koizumi's desire to make an approachable game that was easy for players to figure out eventually led him to the bongos as the key controller for this new Donkey Kong game. The bongos are a purely Nintendo idea, gimmicky and kind of silly, but when put in creative hands, they can provide ideas that we didn't even know we wanted. Donkey Kong Jungle Beat is no exception. Drumming on either the right or left bongo moves DK in that direction. Drumming both bongos has DK jump, and clapping lets DK use his sound wave attack. It's incredibly easy to get into a rhythm with Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, and not just because the controls are simple. Between the size of the drum surfaces and the integrated sound sensor for DK's soundwave clap, the bongos are almost perfectly designed for Donkey Kong Jungle Beat's mechanics, or maybe vice versa. And that matters a lot, because controlling DK with the bongos feels extremely animated. This is a game where that whole take a break mantra that came up in the Wii age seems apropos, because Donkey Kong Jungle Beat will make you sweat. Moving so much more than your thumbs is a naturally more tiring setup, and whether that was Nintendo's plan or not, the bongos keep things engaging far more than you might expect. Against all odds, they work incredibly well. Aside from the game's defining control scheme, another major change is Donkey Kong Jungle Beat's total lack of characters and locales from the Donkey Kong Country games, especially aesthetically. After so many titles that cultivated such unique lore and mythology, Nintendo's insistence to distance Donkey Kong Jungle Beat from Rare's established world was jarring. And even as someone without a ton of nostalgic connection to the Donkey Kong Country universe, I can see why that insistence can feel off-putting. I mean, not even Diddy Kong made the cut in Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. Instead, the game brings aboard original characters with clearly different graphic direction. From cute helper monkeys to intimidating boss fighters, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat certainly tries something new in crafting its cast. In comparison, the Donkey Kong Country Super Nintendo series cast had a kind of fractured realism, even in its most abstract moments in DKC 2 and 3. Maybe it's the shading on the pre-rendered models or the way each character is animated, but DKC never had the same kind of abstract cartoonish vibe that's so openly displayed in DK Jungle Beat. Even DK64, with its constantly expressive characters, doesn't match what Nintendo's pushed here. The fact that Koizumi and his team would eventually move on to Super Mario Galaxy, a much more abstract platformer, only further reinforces the devs' commitment to the fully unique cast and cartoonish aesthetic direction of Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. This is a totally different Donkey Kong, through and through. The same can be said of the game's music, helmed by Mahito Yokota, who would work with legendary composer Koji Kondo on Super Mario Galaxy's score. In fact, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat's score has a ton of Mario trappings, with bouncy rhythms and plenty of melodic flourishes to complement DK's moves. While some classic jingles do appear at times, it's remarkably different than anything that David Wise or Grant Kirkhope composed for the series. It trades atmosphere and scene setting for lush and vibrant energy, but it's not until you get into the game that you start to see that this transition was necessary. Yokota's musical composition, sensibly, is very Nintendo. For example, early levels like Monkey Fest are a joyous celebration as the helper monkeys appear in the background and clap their hands with the beat. It's a small but very nice touch that drives home the game's rhythmic focus. In comparison, Sweet Paradise's surreal floating jelly environments have an energetic and tropical theme, trading off intense spectacle for something inviting. Even the more imposing sections like the boss themes are just so damn Nintendo in their tone. Despite being showdowns against major antagonists, they're hardly grim, making DK's trials less about high stakes and more about the fun of the journey. They may lack that Wise or Kirkhope identity, and Yokota's signature may be more visible in Super Mario Galaxy's much more epic score, but Donkey Kong Jungle Beat's compositions are just so fun to listen to. Similar to its presentation, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat relies on a much simpler premise than the Rare SNES trilogy. DK is willing to do whatever it takes to be the strongest in the jungle, while scarfing down whatever bananas he can find along the way. There isn't much else to it. The gradual narrative focus across the Rare Donkey Kong games was becoming clearer as the games moved on, reaching a peak at Donkey Kong 64's massively ambitious storyline. The stakes were higher than ever, especially with King K. Rool pushing his Kremling crew to their limits in one of the most cinematic and epic games in DK history. Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, in total contrast, is almost facetiously basic. This time around, DK is all about taking down foes to be the king of the jungle. That's it. While the Wii re-release does provide a bit more narrative context, the GameCube original doesn't provide much detail at all for why DK is doing what he's doing. It's a huge downsizing, one that feels so incredibly bizarre when compared to the sky-high ambitions that Rare was aiming for with DK64. New levels replace familiar locales, classic animal buddies like Rambi and On Guard have transparent replacements. Nintendo really went all out in changing the world of Donkey Kong to suit Jungle Beat's new vibe. And while it's admirable to see them making such a paradigm shift in the name of keeping things exciting, I'm sure there could have been some kind of compromise between preserving Rare's classic universe and implementing Nintendo's abstract new direction. But when you take away the unorthodox controller and almost blank slate approach to the game's world building, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, without question, is one of the most fascinating games to appear in the entire Donkey Kong franchise. This is a game about score, and, like its presentation, that feels like Nintendo openly rejecting Rare's past games in the series. While Donkey Kong Country tied much of its appeal to engaging platforming and finding secrets, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, at its core, comes across as elementary. It's about increasing your score, yes, but it does so with a very simple collection of mechanics and a survival system that's incredibly lenient. DK's health, at least in the GameCube version of the game, is determined by his beat score, fueled by collecting bananas. When all beats are depleted, it's game over. Getting attack while having 0 beats is very difficult to do, and as a result, this makes Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, at least seemingly, an incredibly easy game. Completing levels doesn't take a lot of dexterity if your goal is simply to get to the end. If you're willing to adjust to some cumbersome navigational challenges and take a few hits, reaching that hanging fruit is going to be a cakewalk. But remember what I said earlier, this is a game about score, and that's where the depth in Donkey Kong Jungle Beat lies. Collecting bananas to net beats is simple, yes, but pulling off tricks and staying airborne increase your combo meter, which raises the number of beats you earn when grabbing bananas. Keep that combo high and nab as many pickups as you can, all while dodging hazards and traps, and watch that beat count skyrocket, wrapping up with an indulgent banana-devouring minigame at the level's end. Like in any great score attack game, it may not require a ton of work to reach that finish line, but putting in that extra effort to nab a top-tier combo and maximum points as you go can be fulfilling in a totally different way. It's not just about completing a level, it's about doing it in the most stylish way possible. That's DK Jungle Beat to a T. And nothing says get good like a ranking system. It's so much more addictive when you're out to make the grade, and Donkey Kong Jungle Beat's crest system is deceptively demanding. After completing a stage, your beat counter is tallied, and depending on how many beats you collected, you're given crests, which are used to progress and unlock more levels. While obtaining crests early on can be breezy, eventually the game will require more crests than a basic playthrough can provide. This means that you're going to need to sharpen your skills to progress, and honestly, that's an intimidating prospect, especially if you're bold enough to reach for the hidden platinum crests. DK Jungle Beat doesn't screw around, and when the later kingdoms arrive, don't expect much leniency. Between dodging fireballs, evading pits, and beating the crap out of enemies, you already have your hands full, but you still need to collect beats and keep that combo going. It's a strange comparison for sure, but if you've ever gotten into a game in the Devil May Cry or Bayonetta series, this will sound like familiar territory. Sure, you can simply run and jump your way to the end while taking a few hits along the way, but the real reward is mastering your skills without any missteps and making the grade. Like any great action game of that sort, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat has a high skill ceiling. It encourages making that perfect run where your skills are honed to a fine point, where every move is made exactly when it needs to be. Game design like that, as satisfying as it can be when it occurs, isn't for everyone, and Donkey Kong Jungle Beat doesn't do much to change that. And even if you do still value that score attack direction, having a single slip-up ruin your run can mean restarting the entire kingdom over again. Trust me, it's taxing, but at its core, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat is designed to push players further and further. It's tough to top that feeling of attaining that perfect run. Of course, finding that perfect run is impossible without level design that incentivizes flow, and for the most part, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat doesn't complicate things on that front. Most levels are pretty spacious, giving the player plenty of room to move and plenty of range to activate DK's Soundwave attack. The levels are linear, but they accommodate stylish and proficient play, introducing minor detours that can increase your combo or even net you hidden bananas for more beats. While they absolutely don't match the introspection of Donkey Kong Country, the stages in Donkey Kong Jungle Beat have enough depth to cohesively complement the core gameplay. Once you've done enough exploring to find the path to the most points, nailing that key path with well-timed moves can make all the difference between a gold crest and a platinum crest. As I said, it feels like the platformer equivalent of action games like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta. With combos and high scores as incentives, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat is highly replayable. But no game is perfect, and Donkey Kong Jungle Beat is no exception. There are some small quirks and even some ridiculous design decisions that make the game less of a success than it could be. DK's actual gameplay model can appear pretty small in these stages, even with a blown-up version in the corner in many cases. But that's a minor concession to make, and a much more accommodating outcome than a heavily zoomed-in camera that doesn't let you see what's going on. The camera does zoom in during DK's pummeling attacks, where the player hammers the bongos to smash an enemy into submission, which is an excellent decision because the spectacle of these situations is nothing short of invigorating. Sure, DK comes off as a wild, sort of ruthless protagonist, but on a player basis, few moments are as empowering as these. However, while the game's basic combat and point chasing are absolute highlights, the gameplay detours don't match the same heights. Using the Hellabirds to meticulously flutter through mazes or carefully swimming past dangerous jellyfish simply don't match the tactile intensity of pummeling an enemy into the dirt and leaping up to keep a combo going. Even worse are the races, which trade off wild set pieces and exciting combo potential for a mad dash to the finish. There are extra paths that can get you some bonuses, but they simply don't hold a candle to the more traditional combo-heavy gameplay. When DK is on foot, no strings attached, things are far more compelling. But even these moments can result from a focus on trepidation, as levels like Ancient Foundry have larger hazards, requiring a more careful hand when navigating. It's nice seeing a bit of peril and difficulty in later stages, but this is a bit extreme, and sort of counterintuitive to the flow that the game ultimately sets out to achieve. Also, the creativity that makes the main levels so captivating and replayable isn't transferred well into the boss fights, which repeat so frequently and with so little nuance that replaying them quickly becomes a chore. While the confrontations certainly retain an intensity and spectacle in how DK attacks, the boss's action patterns and gimmicks simply don't offer much diversity. The changes act as minor increases in difficulty than full-on new boss fights. The grudge matches against the ape antagonists fare a bit better, acting very much like the Punch-Out games, with gathering reeds and pummeling them at the right time. These fights also have a pretty interesting visual and camera direction, heightening the intensity and making each fight appear like the epic one-on-one duels they're clearly trying to be. And while the final boss may not broaden the playing field significantly from the other fights, the over-the-top presentation and DK's crazy fight choreography definitely reach a high point here, even if you still feel like it could go just a bit further. It's almost inevitable that Donkey Kong Jungle Beat would be compared to Rare's library of Donkey Kong titles, and really, that wasn't absent from my mind during my many playthroughs of this game. It's natural to compare a piece of media to those that came before it, even when you're absolutely dead set on judging it on its own merits. We've seen it again and again. Series change over time, and with Rare's vacancy, all bets were off on what was in the cards for Donkey Kong moving forward. But Jungle Beat is a surprise haymaker, a striking in-your-face statement that showed DK in a totally new light, one with unprecedented potential. After giving this game so much attention, I know for sure that this is a radically different game from Rare's work, aesthetically, narratively, and mechanically. While I understand that Donkey Kong Country has been in capable hands as of recent years and that Nintendo's core team has moved on to bigger and bolder projects, I can't help but lament that Donkey Kong Jungle Beat never got a true console sequel. Like any great score attack game, its mechanics are simple enough to be approachable, but can be easily expanded upon through engaging level design, conscientious use of set pieces, and an overall drive for refinement. And Nintendo have that capability. Their Tokyo EAD studio proved that out of the gate with a debut title so refreshingly off the wall that I'm stunned that it's simply a footnote in the Great Apes history. This game's reputation, tied to Nintendo's gimmicky late-generation peripheral or not, deserves so much better than what it received, because Donkey Kong Jungle Beat is a lush, polished, and incredibly fun game that demands player improvement and eventual mastery of its mechanics. Whether or not this was DK's destined direction is still up for debate, but even with Rare's irremovable signature on the franchise, I appreciate Donkey Kong Jungle Beat in a totally different way. And I hope that Nintendo will, even for just an instant, consider revisiting this exciting direction for its venerable but constantly surprising hero.